get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman, and thank you again. Back-to-back weeks, we actually have In the Clouds, so it's like to be able to do that, and apologies that I'm not on a more regular cadence. Last week, we had a great session talking about the KubeCon conference, which is happening up less than 2 weeks now in Paris, and this week we are back to talking about one of our favorite topics, of course, which is OpenShift itself. OpenShift 4.15, we will be talking about it plenty at the KubeCon show, and I'm happy to welcome to the program, as I usually do for one of the OpenShift release, one of our lead product managers for this topic. Happy to welcome Sachin Maulik. He is a senior manager with OpenShift on the product management side. Sachin, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to spend a bunch of time talking about virtualization, which has absolutely been a red hot topic in the industry for 20 years, but even more so in the last couple of months. So thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very excited to be here, Stu. Thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity to talk about what we are doing in OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Sachin, if you could give our audience a little bit, your background. You've been at Red Hat a little over 2 years. I was actually surprised. I'm 3.5 years, and I was like, wait, no, you've only been here 2 years. It feels like you've been here longer. But you and I have had some paths crossing in our careers. So yeah, give our audience a little bit of your background, what brought you to Red Hat, and your role here.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, my life started in a Linux company. Actually, it was a Unix company, to be precise. I started at SCO Unix. I was fascinated by operating systems when I graduated from my master's in computer science. And that's really what I wanted to do all my life. So I ended up at SCO Unix, and then I jumped ship to EMC. I went there, actually, that's where I met you, Stu. So I went there to work on file systems, and somehow I got this reputation working on NAS as the file system guy. So the next 15 years I've been trying to shake that reputation off. I actually was pulled into by one of the VPs I was working. He was invited to join the Cloud Center of Excellence in Durham, North Carolina, to build out a private cloud, which is EMC wide. And the whole concept was to make it that it can be self-service. Every group, like if you're doing a demo or you're trying to do training or have like a new group join, they can instantly get access to infrastructure as a service. So for 3 years or so, I worked on that. It was a very humbling experience being at the other end of IT, not just developing products, but using them, having a 24/7 service where if somebody's doing a demo in Singapore and calls me that this thing isn't working, everything is basically teaches you why IT relies on products so much. So I love that experience. I jumped into hyper-converged. It was a new wave starting around 2017, and worked with VMware, Nutanix, Microsoft, have created hyper-converged appliances. So yeah, a very big background, but I love this enterprise technology and infrastructure space. I actually ended up at Red Hat because one of my neighbor who was with me at EMC kept saying this is the best company he's worked for and you must interview here. And I was like, I'm not sure. And I went and interviewed, and I was in love with what was happening here. So much innovation, and I thought, this is my opportunity to be in the next wave that's coming up in technology. So that's why I ended up at Red Hat.
Yeah, it's funny, Sachin, right? You talk about some of those career moves. It was actually right my next door neighbor that helped convince me to interview at EMC back in the day, and I had a couple of friends there. In my early times at EMC, I worked with the Linux community around the time that Red Hat created was originally Red Hat Advanced Server, which turned into Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and had good workings with them. Back in my analyst days, I worked with Red Hat, and yeah, it was a great company. Knew many people there, and yeah, we've had lots of discussions on this program about the unique culture that we have in Red Hat and the like. All right, love we could reminisce for a long time on this kind of stuff, but we should hop right in. OpenShift 4.15. We track the upstream Kubernetes, of course, which these days is hitting a 3-time-a-year cadence, so about once every 4 months. So same thing for OpenShift. We typically trail, it's about 4 to 6 months behind the upstream, so that we can test, package, put all of the pieces together. And OpenShift 4.15 has the upstream Kubernetes 1.28. And at KubeCon, Sachin, it's hard for me to believe. We're talking about, it's really been 10 years since Kubernetes was introduced to the market back in June of 2014. I happened to be at DockerCon in 2014 when some of those early public sessions were shared. And, containerization was certainly growing. Kubernetes, of course, is a wave that, really helped drive this entire cloud native discussion. We want to get into OpenShift 4.15, but I'm curious, you think back 2014, was before you were even working on some of the hyperconverged stuff. So, when did you first, run across Kubernetes and start thinking about it?
Yeah, actually 2014 was the time I started building out the private cloud, and I had no idea about Kubernetes. So you guys were truly innovators at that point. And I thought cloud was at the innovation front in 2014. But really, Kubernetes, I think when I started working on hyperconverged, we had probably 2 or 3 years before we joined, we started hearing from customers like, hey, it's not all about VMs. We need to have containers. And we definitely couldn't do it on our own. So we had discussions both with Google and with Red Hat on doing some integration. So that's how I started learning about it. And actually, one of the person who was working for me, who was actually in this space, fell in love with that and went to a software-defined storage company working on Kubernetes. So I could see the writing on the wall that this thing's going to be huge.
Yeah, gosh, Sachin, definitely brings back memories. Remember when cloud started, there was that discussion of private cloud. Is it a thing? Should it be real? Even today we talk about, how do we really get the cloud operating model in, a data center? And we've come a long way along that process. But the last few years, one of the areas we've spent a lot of times talking about, and where Kubernetes has a strong play, is at the edge. So maybe if we could just talk a little bit about, edge computing. I know, your virtualization discussions a lot of times gets out to, remote areas and edge, and because we do have some exciting updates in OpenShift 4.15 around edge.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, Stu, you and I did a session in the Red Hat Sales Kickoff on Edge, and it was fascinating to see how the Edge is present basically in every company and has so many different applications, right? So one of the things we are working on is, as you look at the cloud ecosystem, there is a lot of interest in going into AWS outputs or wavelength. So if you have low latency applications that want to go into wavelength, or you are starting with AWS and you have some things that cannot go into the public cloud, but you still want to be AWS standardized, you can use Outposts. We have G8, our integrations with both of them with 4.15. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just, those are definitely, really important things. A lot of times people are like, oh, it's like, the cloud is extending their stack into closer to the customer or even in the customer environment, and often don't think about the fact that there's an ecosystem that comes with that. So OpenShift, we're just software. We can live, in the customer's hardware. We can live on the cloud's hardware. And as the cloud moves their stack in various environments, we can just live on top of that. So yeah, it's an exciting thing. Some interesting architectures that we do to enable those kind of things. And we've been talking about it for about a year or two, and is super excited to see it go generally available.
Yeah, and I think also we have a great partnership with NVIDIA, so you'll see a lot more NVIDIA supported solutions, including with what we call Microshift, which was GA'd in 4.14. So there's a lot of cool enhancements coming. Microshift extends the Kubernetes paradigm to the extreme edge, and that's like a really good addition we have for our customers who are looking at this and saying, I just need to have just enough Kubernetes to run my application at this edge device and cannot really put the whole OpenShift on top of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Super important to call out NVIDIA. They've got their conference coming up in a couple of weeks. And, people start throwing out, it's like, okay, I want the NVIDIA Jetson Orin-based devices. Awesome. Microshift now supports that. So a lot of deep work going within NVIDIA. Not only is it just an architecture in the cloud and at the edge, but of course, one of those critical components when we talk about AI workloads. So we've been working super close with NVIDIA. One other thing before, we want to spend a lot of time talking about virtualization, but observability has been a big topic. We, of course, partner with a broad ecosystem of partners there, but we've been also working with a lot of open source technologies to make sure that it fits into our stack. So I believe we have a pretty exciting update in that space.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, OpenTelemetry is becoming the standard in the industry. This was formed by the merger of two different projects. And as with anything Red Hat, we try to go with best of breed. So I think there are like 11,000 people who worked on OpenTelemetry in the open source community. So we definitely want to embrace it. And we are going generally available with the OpenShift telemetry support with Red Hat OpenShift with this release.
Yeah, it was one of the things I remember, as you said, there were two separate projects that were a little competing, and oftentimes that does thrive in the ecosystem, and it's one of the areas where the CNCF really helped guide things along, because those two projects had enough similarity and just almost too much overlap that they ended up being able to merge those two projects. There was a lot of great engineering work, and then that took the leadership. So it's awesome that we now have a Red Hat build of that technology. We're going to throw up in the chat. There is a page that shows all of the what's new with Red Hat OpenShift. And in there, you will find the slide deck as well as the replay of the video that the entire product management team did. It's really good info. It's a deep dive on this technology, and you can really geek out on all the bits and bytes that go in there. So we're going to talk a bit more about the updates in the virtualization around that space. But yeah, just want to make sure that that's there. And be sure to check that out when you have a chance, because we always look at that goes first, and then this session really up levels a little bit to give you some of the key highlights. But I know, Sachin, I always refer back to it. I have meetings with customers and partners. We always refer back to the deck and the video, because there's just so much good information, and none of us can keep up with all of the pieces that are moving in that space. All right, so we're here to talk about the main topic, your the t-shirt you're wearing and the space that you and your team works on and everything. So I teed it up before. I mean, Sachin, virtualization has been around for a long time. I mean, it predates VMware. They did bring it, really to the mass market for x86, but, it had existed, in not only mainframes, but Solaris had done some things in virtualization. A lot of the Unix technologies had virtualization technology, but, VMware has been, was for a long time the core of a very large ecosystem that many of us lived in heavily. Let's talk a little bit, if you could, for our audience, just encapsulate, if you will, what's been happening in the cloud native space when it comes to virtualization, the KubeVirt project, and our productization of that in OpenShift virtualization, which comes with OpenShift.
Yeah, definitely. I also want to echo something you just talked about, the roadmap. This was a big change for me. Like in my last few companies, if I wanted to talk about the roadmap, you'll make a customer sign an NDA. And when I came here, the very first month or so, there was the roadmap session happening, and it was being broadcast on YouTube. So I was like, really, open source has a different philosophy where we are really open on everything. It's not just what's being put in the bits and bytes. So I really embrace that. And the same thing like with OpenShift virtualization, which is our product, this is built on open source, right? So if I go back in time before I was even here, I was talking to our director of engineering on the history. So Red Hat actually bought this company called QumraNet, and QumraNet started KVM in 2007. A lot of the players who actually started that are still at Red Hat. And so that KVM stack, if you think about it, Red Hat took this and with the open source community built it basically the de facto standard for most of the cloud providers. Most of what you see outside of the ESXi is built on KVM. So around like 2016 or so, I was talking to my director and he said they were essentially looking at what's the next wave going to be. And we just talked about Kubernetes being 10 years in, right? So this was like 2 years into Kubernetes. And they could see like if we want to stay innovative, a lot of this, the way that infrastructure is managed is going to have a lot more automation, need more of a declarative infrastructure. And after looking at a bunch of different things, decided Kubernetes is the way to go. And if you think about it, at that time, Kubernetes was mostly about containers. So they had to come up with the concept of custom resource definitions, working with Google at that time. And essentially, that CRD is now so widespread. But that's how we basically have the marriage of KVM, which has existed from 2007, and then the management paradigm switching to Kubernetes around 2016 timeframe. And that's how OpenShift virtualization came up. So built on a very stable, performing, reliable hypervisor platform, but then you're bringing all this innovation, right? You talked about Kubernetes. There's like 175 more projects around Kubernetes and probably couple 100,000 developers innovating. So the speed at which we can move by combining what's happening in the CNCF ecosystem with what's happening at the performance and reliability of KVM can just outpace anything else that's happening in the world. So that was the vision. And it is coming to a reality. Like we have some very large customers getting ready to talk about at KubeCon. I know you're going to be there, to you. Like we have Goldman Sachs coming up. They have been on this journey. They'll talk about this in KubeCon EU. In one of the keynote speeches there, we have some other customers like who are not just doing things inside the data center. We just talked about edge. So we have and NOAA basically, which is the one that gives you these weather alerts. Hopefully there's nothing happening today outside. But if you think about it, they have to be in some very difficult places, right, to be able to give you these weather alerts. There are 150 different places they have clusters being installed with OpenShift virtualization. And they love the consistency of being able to manage all these clusters with one centralized management through ACM, and then having containers as a future that they can bring in as they take some of these applications and build that in.
Yeah, Sachin, there's a lot to unpack there. So it's funny, with my long history of VMware, I remember in the early days it was like, my operating system, my underlying hardware, how do I pull things away from that so that I don't have to think about when they go into life or change or anything. I can put something in a virtual machine, and hey, with vMotion, I can now move things around. Today it's like yikes, I want to take advantage of things like pipelines and more cloud native architectures. Some things make sense to move to containerization, but plenty of things will be in virtual machines for quite a while, so we can bring those virtual machines into that more modern environment. As you said, the NOAA organization, I want to centrally manage lots of locations and do it in a modern way. That you bring it into OpenShift and you can take advantage of all of those. That's really awesome. Specifically around 4.15, can you give us kind of what are some of the new things? Maybe for audience that isn't might not be up on the latest, the 4.15 and maybe anything that's happened kind of in the last 6 months that might be relevant.
Yeah, no, definitely. So as I said, OpenShift virtualization is bringing in KVM into OpenShift. So a lot of the innovation, and we talked about cloud, right? So we being at the forefront of creating a open hybrid cloud gives us some insights with our customers on what they're looking for. One of the things that we have just recently released with 4.15 is the ability to use instance types. That terminology shouldn't feel that strange to you if you have coming from the cloud world. Essentially, you can select your boot source, which could be like a Windows, Linux machine type, and you could bring your own if you want. And then you decide what type of environment you want, like are you CPU intensive, memory intensive? We talked about NVIDIA. We have a machine type for that. And then you just click on what size you want, like there's some predefined sizes, and you're off to the races. So that's basically 3 clicks to get a VM deployed. And that helps not only when you're talking about, say, from the UI, it also helps when you start thinking about like DevOpsy, like concepts, right? So if you're putting these things in pipelines, and if you have to write like 50 different lines of code, you could have some mistakes in there. You start using instance types, it's like a very simple definition, and then you can have it in your pipeline and CI/CD. So that's some of the things we have. The other one is around hot add. So if you think about hot adding, we already support disk, and we added in the network with this release. And then one of the couple other big features is around working with OpenShift Data Foundation, which is a software-defined storage layer available also from Red Hat, and that layer has now Metro DR support. And then if you start thinking about having predefined IP addresses for a virtual machine, and you want to then do IP filtering, that's also coming through. Again, from the ecosystem, we have the OVN Kubernetes project, which we have brought into secondary networks. So these are like some of the newer stuff. Of course, OpenShift virtualization has been there from like 4.5. So there's a lot of innovation coming out every release.
Yeah, and it's one of the challenges is that these build on each other. So you talk of instance types is super awesome to have that, because it was actually, I would look at it a little bit of a gap that we had when just in 4.14, we brought OpenShift virtualization to AWS. So running on AWS, it's bare metal. We actually have, Sachin, if you're up for it, we have a comment from the audience there to understand a little bit about pricing. And while OpenShift virtualization is just a feature of OpenShift and it comes with OpenShift. So OpenShift Virt, it comes with it, it's free. But the nuance is in the data center, if I'm running on bare metal, pricing is a little bit different. And if I'm running in the cloud, I'm using in cloud, it's AWS, you're running on their bare metal. Amazon did update their pricing I believe it was the second half of last year. And now with instance types, that helps you with the pricing. So can you broad strokes, give us a little bit of, hey, if I'm looking at this environment in the data center or in the cloud,
Sure.
what are some of the pricing implications that I should
Yeah,
be looking at?
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the great things, as you pointed out, right, OpenShift virtualization actually is not a product; it's a feature. I think of OpenShift as like an app store, and you have OpenShift virtualization as an app. So if the only thing you're interested in is virtual machines today, and you're not yet there, say using GitOps or containers, you could just start with virtual machines. And again, all of these features are included with OpenShift SKUs. We also have some special SKUs that you can use, which are based on bare metal. So those are priced accordingly to be able to handle virtual machines. You should definitely look at that. The other interesting thing about OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization is if you're going to be running, say, RHEL VMs on top of OpenShift virtualization, those entitlements are included. So from a value proposition point of view, I don't think price is going to be a factor. It's really about coming to this more modern virtualization platform. So as we start talking about cloud, again, yeah, bare metal, if you are just running like 5 or 6 VMs, definitely you are getting the whole server dedicated to you. So bare metal pricing will be more expensive in the cloud perspective. But we have done modeling on this. So if you start using reserved instances and right size to the correct bare metal offering from AWS, the scale at which you'll run, which is probably like at least 5 or 6 nodes, and having your VMs running there, it really becomes a no-ops. So, and there's so much more innovation coming from AWS and Red Hat combined on this that it's almost like a no-brainer. I can talk about some customer examples too around.
Yeah,
Rosetta.
I think you did a really good rough outline. I'd say I hope the audience member that asked the question, if that helps, please do reach out. If there's further questions, both in the data center, we have people that can help, as well as our teams that are dedicated on kind of the AWS ROSA stuff are actively advised. I know I've seen some of the modeling that Sachin mentioned there, so I don't want to talk about that too much. Yeah, Sachin, love customer examples. What's the real world as customers.
Yeah.
I think that there's obviously multiple factors. There's number one, it's like, oh, okay, hey, what's the overall cost going to be for me? But what about my applications? What about my skill set? And I know we're going to talk about like the activities we've been doing. Just I'm worried about, can my people do this, or is this going to be too heavy a lift to get from where I am to where I want to be in the future?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's actually 3 different things we can talk about in terms of getting here from there. I'm gonna stay with the cloud theme just because it's like front and center based on the last question. So actually we have a managed service offering with AWS called ROSA. What it allows you to is essentially offload all your infrastructure management to Red Hat, and then you can concentrate on the applications on top of it. So that makes your life easy. You don't have to figure out the infrastructure life cycle. We will do that for you. Also, one of the reasons why ROSA and OpenShift virtualization is getting a lot of traction is because there are certain applications, like say if you start thinking about Windows .NET applications, it's on the roadmap for a lot of customers to maybe containerize it over time, but they don't have the luxury to wait, right? Their customers are asking them, or their end business units are asking them to get into the cloud today. So the easiest way to do it is to bring that into OpenShift, but just as VMs, and then you're off having these applications in production. So we have a customer doing exactly that. They started out with one application that needed this Windows .NET, and the way it worked out for them was so easy. They're actually looking at another larger application that's going to reuse the exact same fundamentals. So that's one of the things around being in OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization. So the other two things that happen is like we talked about infrastructure, right? So AWS makes it easy, Rosa makes it easy. Same things happening on the on-premises front. We have some very strong partnerships, and some of them are already generally available. So if you look at the Dell Apex for OpenShift platform, that had come out, I think, last year sometime. Stu, you probably have more insight into the exact time frame. But essentially, that is a factory-built appliance, right? So if you think about your need to stand up something new, it comes fully factory-built, and as new releases come out, basically, Dell Apex is going to do both the firmware and the infrastructure from OpenShift uh, qualification in their lab. So when you get something like that, you're assured it's going to work. And everything's managed through a single pane of glass. So whether you want to see your hard disk status or you want to see your VMs running in there, it's all built into this single pane of glass. So it's very fascinating. Same thing we are doing with IBM Fusion HCI. That's a great appliance, those who are looking into it. So those are like the other types of things we are doing. And then in general, like OpenShift, whether you talk about appliances or in the cloud, OpenShift virtualization, we spent the last few years now building out the user interface for virtual machines. So I just talked about virtual machines like being like an app in the App Store. So we have like your top talkers. You want to look at your VM statistics. You want to do basic operations, start, stop, delete, snapshot. You want to look at different configurations. All of that you can do from the user interface. And the way OpenShift is built, like it's an API first platform, right? So if you are a larger customer, you build your own UI, everything that we do, the API is available to you to build into your own cloud interface if you have built that. And we have CLI tools for the people who love that. So I call OpenShift virtualization as a marriage of ClickOps and DevOps. We are not taking away what you do today, right? I think back to like QuickBooks as an example, right? When QuickBooks started, it used to be like they built the interface to be like a checkbook. So you go in there and you enter your numbers and it's all electronic, but they wanted you to have that familiar interface. So it's the same thing with OpenShift virtualization. We have a familiar interface for the vAdmins who are coming into OpenShift. They'll be able to do all their virtualization stuff like the day did yesterday. But at the same time, there's a lot more power. We talked about GitOps and being able to use pipelines and Tekton and Argo CD. So all these tools are available to you to use at your own pace. If you were with, say, the previous vendor for 20 years, you want to switch to something where actually what you're coming into can get you through the next 20 years. But we want you to start your journey at the place where you're familiar and then build on top of that.
Yeah. I love, Sachin, how you laid that out, because one of the things when we change, sometimes I don't just want to do like for like. I want to look at the options. So if I want to adopt cloud, I can just shift all of that. You said managed service. We've got an SRE team that can take care of that. I don't even need to think about it. In the data center, as you said, we've worked with a number of our hardware partners. They're doing a lot of great engineering work to remove a lot of that burden. And they've got, the same thing that they did to make virtualization easier. They're helping to do the same with containerization. So I think a huge opportunity there. And then, you've been going around, you and the team. I love, we've got, Peter and Simon sitting in the chat too, helping out on some of this. We've been out meeting with customers, doing some regional events to talk also, how do I get from here to there? And, there's some new things, but here's the opportunities, here's the new things. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about the roadshow and
Sure.
Where did that come from? And how do I find one near me?
Yeah, again, being a software engineer by background, I love this roadshow. Even though it's a marketing concept, it reminded me of the phases we go through in engineering, right? We have a dev preview usually of a new feature, then we go into a tech preview, and then we make it generally available. So the roadshow actually now is at the generally available stage, but I want to go back to the history of this. So Andrew Sullivan, who's the OpenShift admin, had created a lab in Red Hat Summit for last year, and there was I think we had like 2 sessions that could accommodate 100 people, and there was demand to add one more session, and we didn't even have space to add that. So, and the people who went through that lab, it was a 90-minute lab session, were like, wow, this thing is easy. I can use this. I like it. So we started thinking about it, and I think I was sitting in a meeting with Grant Shipley, whom a lot of you may be knowing, and he started talking about how 10 years back with OpenShift, they did this roadshow, and it will probably be cool to get these vAdmins exposed to OpenShift virtualization, as it feels alien to a lot of people coming from the infrastructure side. OpenShift has a huge following on the app side. So it was, how can we make sure people understand this thing is not that different than what you're doing? And the roadshow became an interesting concept. So as with anything new, we didn't know if the roadshow people will like it. So we decided, let's just do a pilot with two different formats. Actually, we said, let's get some large customers who are already thinking about using us, maybe doing some spreadsheet compares, but let's get their virtual admins into a room for 4 or 5 hours, tell them our vision, but instead of teaching them, let them do the whole thing themselves. These are virtual admins who have 20 years experience, 10 years experience. They should be able to use the product themselves. That would be a good test for us that we did the right thing. And so we did one. Actually, it was more difficult to get into that government contractor. We had to get special badges and all that. But once we were in, it's basically a URL you go to and you can do all your application creation. You can even move in virtual machines from, say, whatever you're using today, whether VMware or a previous version. And it's all essentially like a live migration into OpenShift virtualization. And that's done by the admins. We just have like a guided lab, but everything's done by the admins. And we did a similar thing where we said, okay, instead of going to a one customer, let's get a few of them into a single room and let them try it out. And we did that actually in New York City, near Wall Street. And we had a lot of public sector customers in that too. And all the feedback we were getting is, in some ways, it was like, I didn't know how easy it is to use. Or in the other things we were getting was like, hey, this thing can do a lot more than what I thought. So as a product manager, sometimes I felt bad, like, hey, we have so many cool features and they didn't know about it, but I swallowed that because we hadn't yet pushed our product that far out. So what we are doing now, based on the success, actually I was in New Delhi when they were doing one, and that was in a hotel called the Taj Mahal Hotel. It's like a 5-star hotel, and with Indian hospitality, one of the best food I had. And the room was full. We had like probably a wait list of 50 people for that. So we knew this thing is not just going good in US, it actually works well. We did one in Ireland too. So based on that, we have it now generally available. So it's going to come to a city near you. So there's a list of cities already that we have from our corporate marketing. I'm sure Simon can provide a link around that in the chat. But if we don't have it coming near you, again, as I said, we can do it just for you as a customer. So you can reach out to your account, or you could just reach out to one of us and we'll make sure we get you in touch with them.
Yeah. Look, Sachin, I think that that's a great way to kind of wrap this. As you said, there's a lot more in the product than most people realize. It's, there's things people I feel like, oh, well, geez, I'm so used to vMotion. It's like, yeah, we've had live migration for how many years now? In the product, some of those things are just, it's, yep, got that checkbox. That's been there for a while. And it's an easier lift for the skill set of the people. I love it now. It's like one of those, okay, you get them in a room for half a day and you put them in front of a keyboard and they're like, yeah, this is awesome. And I totally can do this. And, now I can do a lot more of those cloud native things that I've been hearing about, update that resume and, feel like I'm moving forward with the technology as opposed to being held back by it. So, as we put in the chat, Red Hat Summit will also be a great way to learn more. I know we've got a few customers lined up to share what they're doing. We will also have the hands-on labs. Sachin, you mentioned, my peer, Andrew Sullivan, Sully's got a lab. He and I are working on some great things that we will be doing there. So hopefully you can join us. That's going to be in May in Denver, Colorado, which is a first time for us for Red Hat. We're usually either Boston or used to do San Francisco a lot. So excited to bring it to Colorado. So check that out on the road show. Please talk to your account team and they can help, connect if it makes sense for a regional event or even a bespoke event for you as a specific customer, because that lab being generally available is something that we can spin up relatively easy. Sachin, it's a pleasure chatting with you. I know we are all super busy with, the virtualization discussion, lots of customers, lots of partner and ecosystem discussion. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Stu.
All right. And we will be back with more episodes. Please, as always, feel free to reach out if you've got topics or guests that we should be talking out. If you are going to be at KubeCon Paris, come see Rohan and myself there. We had the great preview last week and are looking forward to hanging out with a lot of the community there. And many more episodes to come as we get ready for Red Hat Summit and Ansible Fest in May, and lots more going on in the industry. I'll even be talking at Red Hat Summit. I'm moderating a panel about artificial intelligence. We didn't talk much about AI other than kind of the NVIDIA reference here. So it was actually a little bit nice to get away from all the AI constant here. But thank you so much for joining us, as always, on your journey in the clouds.